of you who did not make it to the IAPP DC, which evidently many of you did not. Turnout was a little bit lower. Obviously, still a huge crowd as always, and lots and lots of everyone's friends from previous jobs, current jobs, regulators. Lots of fun seeing so many people. Lots of hugs and kisses and condolences. Well, one thing that was fun, picked up a sort of a Minecraft type sword from one of the vendors. Planning on giving this to my son, who's a bit of a gamer. I think it lights up and does. Let's see. Oh, there it is. I don't know how well it's blinking in the over the video. Let's see if it shows. I'm watching on the delay so I can see what you see. No, it doesn't look like the lights are properly reflecting. Okay, well, take my word for it. It does all kinds of sparkly things. Oh, and even in different patterns. Anyhow, but there were fewer vendors as well. Usually one trust has this giant, space, and that they were there, but obviously didn't have the same scale. I think some of it was due to international travel. I think we definitely saw real concerns from people who were. Webb says he could see the sword sparkling. Awesome. Okay. I watched the stream. It's a little bit delayed, so I watched a stream on an iPad with the sound turned off to actually try to see some of the comments real time and the like, and it looked like it wasn't, but glad it was. Anyway, thanks, Webb. But the turnout was definitely down, and I think there's people who are concerned. Did they say something about the administration, or is there some other reason that somehow they're going to be given a hard time? People did say that they came, but they had friends or colleagues who didn't. They said that the airports were empty. I spoke to someone in the kind of travel business who was a privacy person, but at a company that has insight into travel bookings and so forth. And they said travel to the US is absolutely down. So, and obviously anecdotally, we hear about all sorts of people who are supposed to be traveling to conferences and events. So, well, hopefully there'll be a pickup in attendance at events around the world. I mean, that's good. No reason that the US should be the center of all things, privacy. So we'll need to spend more time coming to you. So maybe that's a good thing. Part of it may be that the economy is obviously shaky, and there are lots of companies that are slowing spending until they have more clarity about what's going on with tariffs. So definitely heard from people who were making hard budget decisions and delaying travel. I hope it wasn't because people aren't as interested in privacy or AI risk because of some perception that regulators are not on top of things or are going to be more, flexible and casual about enforcement. I don't think that's the case. FTC is losing some number of staff, and I do imagine that that's likely to have some impact on enforcement. And obviously, there seems to be more interest and time spent on, a number of issues that are a priority to the administration around censorship of conservative speech or misinformation efforts that are not well targeted, according to the current leaders. And obviously, that takes up some time. But I think the traditional privacy and fraud and consumer protection enforcement is what most of the staff there do without that much drama, and that'll continue. You see the antitrust cases, both at DOJ and FTC at this point, against Google and Meta continuing. And so I do think there'll be a lot of business as usual, and that businesses that are taking sort of a message that they can, push the envelope or the like, would be foolish to not recognize that there is real risk. We do hear a lot about people looking to scale their governance. I think there might have been some impression as the initial response to AI that we needed committees that had to really deal with novel issues and have sort of a big centralized process. And I think it quite clearly became obvious that that was not going to scale given the amount of work and the speed and the business units under an imperative to move forward, or Wall Street would punish them or competitors would eviscerate them. And you do see, businesses that have, like say Chegg, where, that was the place where students went to, get help writing a paper, for better or worse. And now the LLMs, do that. Specialized search, the LLMs do that. I have currently allowed a LLM to be my default search provider, so that when I type in information into the box at the top of my browser, instead of getting search results at my favored search provider, I'm getting a generative AI answer. And it's a little uncomfortable because I'm not used to it. And obviously, the usual accuracy issues and that sort of thing. But I feel like I need to understand whether this is really a feasible, replacement, and whether this is something that users really might use to change their behavior. Speaking of which, or at least speaking of search results, I'm watching closely the DOJ action against Google. One of the key pieces is that Google may be required to license its search results to maybe a wide range of comers. And a lot of you know that the way I ended up becoming the chief privacy officer at AOL, I'd been the chief privacy officer at DoubleClick, but I got tired of just talking about cookies and cookies and cookies all day. It seemed like there was more to life than, being an advocate for responsible uses of cookies. I'd been the consumer affairs commissioner for New York City and had a much broader scope. And cookies. After we settled a lot of the litigation and the NAI came into place and self-regulatory rules were put in place, I needed a new challenge. And when I went to AOL, I was vice president for integrity assurance. And the scope of those activities included privacy, online security, advertising standards, our community and content standards, what sort of materials were appropriate at different hours of the day. What did we allow? What didn't we allow? Did you allow porn in the search results when AOL was the search provider? Our kids and teens policies, online safety related to kids and teens, general online safety, accessibility for users with disability. So it was a really broad digital governance. I don't know, perhaps we didn't call it that in those days, scope. And although we had a really good team who worked specifically on privacy, we didn't have sort of a chief privacy officer and a broader, bigger privacy infrastructure. Until the AOL search data release, which I think you all know about. And part of the response to that was me raising my hand and saying, you know what, I like doing all these other things, but I think we need a chief privacy officer and a real broader focus. And so we reorganized my department, and I gave up some of the responsibility for those other issues and took a much bigger, broader, centralized privacy role. But in doing so, and really getting into the details of could you release search data results, even after the release and the identification of some of the users and all of the drama that led to that, there were researchers who wanted access to search data results. And although we said no, I certainly looked hard at, well, is there a way safely, better than what we had done, right? Removing the user's screen name and not much more. Could you go through the results? And let's take a look at what some of the reporters who identified a user did and the clues. And it soon became clear that although you could remove, the most common names, and even then that wasn't so easy, right? Can I not search the name of a celebrity or a historic figure? How big of a celebrity do you need to be? Am I a celebrity? Should you be able to Google Jules Polonetsky? Should I be able to remove any mention of Jules Polonitsky from search results, assuming people want to, research me one way or another. Maybe, I guess, right? Maybe not. So super complicated, but then just unstructured data, even data that might not be clearly personal. You search IAPP conference, you search, pharmacy, you search, a few things one after another, and you might be able to look at that, and a program seeking to de-identify might have no sense that these are a number of, attributes that, if attributed in a longitudinal way to one individual, can lead to identification. People put all kinds of stuff into that search box nowadays, private links that let you access just a, particular Google Doc. So a little bit worried that DOJ isn't taking some of that into account. I'm working on trying to write up something a little bit, just sort of framing the complexities of de-identifying search data. And then, when you do make it available, you got to assume it's end up public, because you give it to some party, and what do they do with it? And they give it to another party. I mean, OpenAI said they want to maybe, buy the Firefox browser. I mean, who's going to line up to kind of buy Google search data queries if they're done at an individual level? Just think about your search results and whether there's anything interesting that you have entered, and whether you would be comfortable, as long as we pulled out, when you searched your name or something like that, or social security numbers, whether you'd be comfortable with the list of everything you searched for being available. So just a note, only because that's quite timely. I believe the proceedings in that case are going on. And obviously, the competition result has been decided by the judge. But in the remedies, I think being really careful about how search information is made available in a way that does support the competition that the case wants to get to, so that competitors who maybe, today didn't get access to users for the reasons that are alleged can catch up. But can this be done in some way that doesn't create a real identification risk? I just want to flag, I posted something that's going to be my weekend reading, and thanks to actually Helen Dixon for flagging it. Helen is now out of her recent role, not as the DPA, but following her DPA role, her role as the telecom regulator, and it's got a little bit of time, I guess, as she plans her next move, to be reading and thinking and listening, as she always did well. But she flagged an interesting article that was circulating on LinkedIn, a big study looking at all the empirical research around the GDPR. Businesses think GDPR is perfect. Others think it's too aggressive. Others think it needs to be opened. Regulators are looking at reopening, given some of the impact on innovation and AI, the feedback from the Draghi report. But what about empirical studies that actually analyze, whether users are better off and whether it has been effective? And so this is sort of a meta-analysis of a whole number of empirical studies, and I'm eager to get into the conclusions. I haven't yet, and if it's interesting, maybe I'll talk about it next week if anybody has had a chance to already look at it. Anyway, I posted a link at the top of the comments here, and if it's interesting, do take a look at it. It looks like a very accessible read. Okay, takeaways from IAPP. What did we learn? I met with one-on-one with, 6 or 7 different regulators at different countries. Had an opportunity to address all the regulators as part of the IAPP's sort of private program for the DPAs. They help them visit the FTC. They arrange presentations for them from the Department of Justice and state and other officials. And then they have a civil society briefing that a number of organizations present, and we are part of that. So what are they all thinking? Well, they're all thinking about the tensions between their regulations and AI and how they're going to deal with that. In Korea, the commission there, the chair, has the authority to propose legislation in their legislative body, which is something unusual. But it's really sort of a ministerial level. Even though they're independent from the government, they have some aspects of authority in this manner. And they've introduced an additional legal basis for processing data if in the public interest, which can include commercial. So super interesting. I'm hoping to learn more about that. I think it's PIPA is the name of the act, and could move in the next couple of months, but might be something other jurisdictions want to look at. Some of the European regulators really see some challenges between, Article 9 and sensitive data and LLMs, which seem to be crawling sensitive data, and I think are working hard to see whether there's some alternative that doesn't include amending the GDPR. Is it better de-identification? Is it other pets? What kind of techniques? We want LMs to be able to respond to, I'd say, sensitive queries. I've been, very open about the fact that I have successfully lost 50 pounds. I know I didn't look like I had 50 pounds to lose, but I did in the past year and a half. And I had a little bit of help from Wegovy or Ozempic, which, is pretty widely available here in the US and has really been fabulous for my blood pressure, cholesterol. I mean, I wasn't in ill health, but, I was higher risk for all of those factors than my doctor would have liked. And, wasn't having to take any special medications or so forth. But, was at higher risk in all the categories, and all those numbers are now, splendid. But all the research says that if you are taking those, you need to take them your entire life, because the research shows that if you stop, well, then you start eating too much again. And if you've been a lifelong, person who eats too much, and, I travel a lot, I have salon dinners, I entertain, I reasonably, careful when I'm in my home or my office, but, airport meals, it's just not the best lifestyle. And, if you have enough diligence or the right genes, I guess it's fine. But, for me, it was always a challenge. And suddenly, right, that extra willpower or the slowing down of digestion or all the other things has been great. But I want to get off it. And so, I've been researching and trying to stay attuned to the best advice. It's not covered by insurance in the US for most of us, so it's expensive. That's the main reason. Can't really afford to be on that forever. Plus, who wants to be on any kind of medication forever? And when I asked that of, one of the leading LLMs, it asked me a whole bunch of really careful follow-up questions for more personalized detail. And then I got, 10 pages of advice with proposals to give me more nuanced, personalized information. It was better than anything I had seen. And I'd been researching, and I'm up on, all the studies and so forth. So, it was, there wasn't anything super novel, but it more effectively tied together just about all of the research in such a clear, effective way, right? We want that, right? That doesn't mean we ought not to go to doctors. But frankly, my doctor said, well, the research says you got to stay on it, and, well, good luck if you want to get off it. He wasn't going to spend a lot of time. He's my, general practitioner. But for lots of people who don't have easy access to a doctor, or frankly, just like me, I'm busy. I don't take the time, even if I have access. I'm being able to get good information when these things continue to get better. And that means needing sensitive data, right? Even before we get to the fact that if you pull out all the sensitive data, you're going to incorporate all kinds of bias-related issues. So we got to deal with this. And whether it's legal development or accommodations, or figuring out how we can use pets to minimize risk. Anyway, the regulators are all thinking hard, and this is just, it's a legal challenge for many, and I'm hoping that we can play a constructive role with different ideas and proposals ourselves. Well, what do they think about the cross-border data flow issue? I mean, the representatives from the US government, in general, all made a clear point that the core that was the problem with cross-border was surveillance, and that the infrastructure, although we don't have the PCOB operating in the same way, the infrastructure, the executive order that provides the oversight, provides the limitations, provides the court system, the ability to contest, the ability to get some sort of explanation when possible, is all in place. Government stands behind it, and it is operational. Is that enough? I don't know, right? Obviously, the independence of the FTC and the commercial side, can be a challenge. PCOB, other issues may be a challenge. But the most important measure that was the hardest to achieve is in place, is operating. The commission certainly doesn't seem focused on pressing the issue, but others do. And obviously, there are some legal challenges, and the courts may see this differently. But I would say the visitors heard, both in public panels and in briefings, good representations from government authorities that the commitment to the infrastructure to guarantee appropriate surveillance oversight is in place. Hopefully we'll hear more of that sort of more publicly. I think you will also be hearing what we've been hearing, which is that the general support for cross-border data flows, again, despite some of the political type comments, the general support for CBPRs, for cross-border data flows, that cooperation, which is important for not just US, but global commerce, is something that the current administration is committed to. The senior people who are relevant to be making those statements are really only first being, appointed. These are things that might emerge, in a bigger political conversation, but typically, are not. These are the things that you hear from, directors and deputy assistant secretaries and that sort of thing. And it's still pretty early. Many of those people haven't yet been appointed. Some have. And the kind of career people who work on these things, are slowly, getting political sign-off to affirm, to make those sort of statements. And so stay tuned. I'm optimistic that we'll hear positive things in that regard. Obviously, tariffs and these data being part of trade and so forth can complicate all of this. So I don't want to make any predictions. There was a recent report, although it's not new, this happens all the time, where many of the countries that have onward transfer restrictions are flagged as creating trade barriers from the US perspective. There was a recent, report that reiterated, again, that many countries that have that, particularly those who have sort of an adequacy GDPR EU model and have those onward transfer restrictions, even though I think outside the drama between US and EU, those have generally not been a huge problem and have been dealt with fairly pragmatically, but the language is on the books, and it is obviously technically a potential cross-border data flow risk. So whether or not these things end up being caught up in the much more adversarial trade deals and so forth, we need to monitor. Other big news, I spoke last week about the DOJ rule and the 90-day period. A lot of talk about, working towards compliance with that. A lot of people working with their counterparts who work on other DOJ relevant things, right? Fraud, foreign practices, right? There's a number of other areas that privacy or AI people aren't as used to working on, that people who do work on the areas where your organization needs to make sure that it has a serious compliance program, or you can have criminal risk, export control related items, foreign corrupt practices, all those sorts of things. And those people are comfortable working with sort of the DOJ type guidance, right? And so a lot of people working together on those issues. Other big news, Google cookie news. Competition regulators win out. Who are the real privacy regulators? Turns out it might be the competition regulator. Right? Everyone knows that due to privacy pressures, Google sought to create an alternative to cookies, but doing so in advance of actually blocking third-party cookies. Apple had obviously made changes long ago via Safari, and obviously the app stores made changes. Apple built out a sort of initially rudimentary system that allowed some sort of reporting and analysis. Some sort of reporting and analysis. but fairly limited. It's gotten a bit better. Google proposed this big sort of sandbox effort where everybody would work together to create sort of aggregated systems that could provide reporting and maybe even some degree of targeting, but happening maybe in the browser, happening in some trusted servers. Industry companies didn't like it. It would have been a radical change, obviously, and reduced some of the utility. Privacy folks didn't particularly love it, even though there was lots of interesting kind of privacy enhanced structure, but others argued it wasn't effective. But at the end of the day, competition regulators didn't see it as pro-competition, and that was the end of it. And so it looks like cookies going to be around for a while. Many in the industry had been working on third-party IDs, sort of opt-in email type systems that would have been obviously more defined about a user's identity than the kind of shaky, imperfect cookie. Many of those might yet continue because some might concede them preferable. None of them had massive scale. Obviously, cookies have massive scale. I do hope it doesn't mean a return to a continuation of the current sloppy chaos that exists in parts of the cookie world. Leashing these things to have better user control, more effective data minimization, I think is critical. But I think many may take the message that, the restrictions are all off. Let's see where it goes. Just a couple of minutes, because I try to keep this to 12:30. I do flag the NIST privacy framework's been updated. It includes even some AI integration, some better security integration. Always a useful tool. So encourage people to take a look at that. All right, let me close with this. We are creating some new special items for some of our friends and supporters. This is a keychain. Okay, so we have a pin that looks just like this. I Heart Privacy. We have a pin that you can wear, a magnetic one, and we use this sometimes on T-shirts or hats or logos. So I kind of like doing a keychain like that. But some of the staff said that this looked really fun. It's a heart, not exactly what we've used, but might be fun. So should we do this one? Which would you want? And they feel nice. They have a little bit of a heft. Would you want one of those if you were coming to one of our special events? If you were a member or a friend? Would you want this? Let's call this number 1. Let's call this number 2. Or number 3. I think no on this one, but maybe you want to surprise me. Just sort of a plain silver with a heart. So it's an option. Anyway, would love feedback from some of you. And if you give me feedback, maybe I'll give you one when I next see you. Hey, have a happy Friday. Really great seeing so many friends, and thanks for the hugs and the support and the friendship. Good weekend all. Happy Friday.